I am here with Todd Connor, who is the CEO and founder of Bunker Labs, which is based in Chicago. Todd, awesome to have you on this podcast, Investors and Operators. Really the purpose of this podcast and a lot of the content that I do is less about the how and the what, and it's more about the who and the why. But before we get to that part of this discussion, Todd, I'd love to kind of turn it over to you and get a little bit of your background leading up to starting Bunker Labs.
Sure. Jordan, thanks for having me on amidst this global pandemic. I'm glad that we're still able to meet face to face and commiserate about kids and challenges of life that are happening in the background for all of us. My quick story, I'm from Chicago, went to school in Chicago, joined the ROTC program, did some time in the Navy, was stationed on board the USS Bunker Hill, which is sort of the namesake for Bunker Labs, actually. And, for me, joining the military, serving was just like something I wanted to do. I was excited to do it. I never saw it as a career for myself. I wanted to sort of have that stamp early in life, and was grateful for everything it was for me. It was an interesting time. It was 9/11. So, pre 9/11, post 9/11, I feel like if you were on active duty at that point, like the world just changed. And I think it's been different ever since. Certainly in the Navy, it was. We went from having a planned deployment with 12 port visits to a deployment that was like 3 months longer with one port visit, so that was sort of the nature of being at sea afterwards. But had an amazing experience, got out, came back to Chicago. Like most veterans that are transitioning out, you're in this journey of like self-discovery and trying to figure out what's my life purpose now. It's both the existential questions of like, what do I do with my life, but also the practical questions of like, how do you go out and network and find the right opportunity? And so just did some things, went to business school, had a couple of different management jobs.
When did you start B school?
I got out of active duty in 2004, started business school in 2005.
Okay.
And I was going to school part-time, evening program at the University of Chicago.
What were you doing to pay the bills when you're...
Yeah, I got a job at a company called McMaster Car Supply Company, and they're a privately held industrial distribution company with a very generous tuition benefit. And they liked hiring junior officers because a lot of the roles, I was supervising different functions within a warehouse as well as had a marketing rotation, but sort of like this generalist management job, and just a really fantastic company, very well run, privately held. So kind of different in terms of some of their methodologies and culture and things like that. But yeah, I was working actually for the state of Illinois in the job that I was not excited about, working for the Inspector General to sort of fight waste, fraud, and abuse within the state of Illinois, which is a really noble mission. I was actually very excited about that mission. Sought the job while on active duty, got the job, started the job, realized, hey, this job doesn't make sense for actually who I am or what I want to do. And I think that's, I think a lot of veterans can share that experience of like, you just got the wrong, you sought something, you got it, but it just wasn't the right thing. And so there's some trial and error that goes into this. And then this company, McMaster Car, called me and said, we think that you should come interview. And I was like, I'm all in. Particularly knowing I had applied for business school, had been accepted, and didn't really have a plan to pay for it. I would have done sort of, gotten student loans or used what I could have through the post 9/11 GI Bill and things like that. But yeah, they paid for it. So that was a gift. And then undergrad was paid for because of ROTC, and that too was a gift. So those are fortunate things early in life.
You started as an investigator at the Inspector General's office for the state of Illinois, and then you became a regional manager for McMaster Car.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was McMaster Car again?
That's an industrial distribution company.
Okay.
Yeah, so I spent 2.5 years there while I got my MBA at night. Yeah. And then
after that, you went to Booz?
Yeah, after that, I went to Booz, and I worked in Booz Allen Hamilton. I worked in their commercial strategy practice, which they later split off as Booz and Company. But I went there. I was working with clients nationally. Was based in DC, but was working primarily in California. And to me, it was sort of like, I felt like you got out of, in the military, like you're on this upward trajectory, you get out. And I think most of us, I certainly did, like you take a dip professionally because you're trying to like figure out what's next. And so I felt like when I got out, I wasn't quite on par with my peers. You take a little bit of a dip, which is a job or two that isn't quite a fit. But then coming out of business school and then getting a job as a management consultant, felt like I was back on parity against my peer set, and was in that job for a year. and felt like I had kind of settled out, if you will, post-military, and then quit. And I was like, I want to start my own business. I want to do entrepreneurial things. And I'm in a good and safe management consulting job. I don't have any debt. And I have dreams of starting businesses and running for, doing things.
Kind of going back to your decision of an MBA, given what you know now, what do you think are some reasons to do an MBA and not to do an MBA?
Mm-hmm.
Should we all just go sit on the beach and do an MBA for 2 years and wait out this, this small thing that's happening?
It's tempting.
Or is this a time to attack and start a business? Like, what are some considerations?
I think you've got to take the long view on your lifetime earned income and have a strategy. I think the short answer is, if it's free, do it. So if you've got yellow ribbon or the GI Bill is paying for it, or in my case, my employer is paying for it, no brainer, get the MBA.
Does that matter on the cachet? Like, I'm only going top tier, otherwise I'm not doing it. What's that opportunity cost?
Yeah, I think, again, I go back to the financial investment. If it's free and you can work and you can go to a top tier school, I think it's a no-brainer. I think, like, absolutely you should do it. I think if it's free and you can work and you can go to I hate to use the term tiers, but, sort of a school that's right for you, I still think do it. I think if, to me, if it's free and it advances you, why wouldn't you do it? If you're having to make choices between that and spending time with your family, then it's more nuanced. And, I would give blanket advice, but I think where you gotta I think where you need to pressure test the thesis is if you're going to take on like $180,000 in debt, I would say time out. A lot of people, too many people, I think, go into an MBA program on the thesis that I'll be better positioned for the future for some opportunity that I don't know yet what it is. And I would say, like, unless you've got a better thesis, you need a better thesis than that before you go spend $180,000 and take on that debt, because it's real debt. I don't care if it's low interest or if it's, or if the payback period is 30 or 50 years. It's real debt. So don't. I think higher ed in some ways has sort of conditioned us that, like, student debt isn't, like, it's sort of like it's acceptable debt. It's not real debt. It's like, it's student debt. Like, that's normal. We all have it. It's like, actually, it's
like the most real debt there is, because you out of all the types of debt you can have, you're still paying that back.
Yeah. And they're, so it's like, and they will get their pound of flesh. And so run the numbers, make this an economic decision. And if you know specifically that you want to be in, like, management consulting and the trajectory of getting to where you need to go requires an MBA from a top school, and you have some forecasts as to what your net earnings are going to be following, then do it. I think most of us don't have a crystal ball and can forecast that level of accuracy. So I go back to, if it's free, go get it. If it's going to be $200,000 in debt, I would say, like, I'd be cautious in this environment before I sign myself up. But now, having said that, I'll contradict myself a little bit and say, if you're unemployed right now and you're trying to figure out, how do I kind of create opportunities in this environment, and it's going to be a rough couple of years, from a timing standpoint, this is probably a good time to go back to school. But I go back to, know the debt that you're taking on. I mean, treat this as a financial decision. It's not just a carte blanche, like, it's always better to have an MBA. I think it's more nuanced than that.
So that was in 2009 when you left booze and then you started to go down the entrepreneurial path.
Yeah.
Can we fill in the story in between that and starting Bunker Labs in 2014?
Sure. I knew I wanted to sort of, here's what I knew I wanted. When you're a management consultant and you're traveling to clients, you're working 80-hour weeks. It's pretty awesome, by the way. Like, you're paying for meals, you're making six figures. Like, I was like, man, this is a good life. But my goal in life has never been just to accumulate, like, wealth, or I'm just not driven by that. It's not that interesting to me. And so, and I think I want to do interesting work, but I also want to do work that matters and is impactful and, like, touches people's lives, right? So I think for me, working a busy job, I didn't have the white space to figure out and have a coherent plan for, here's how I'm going to go start a business. So I sort of used the blunt instrument, which is just like, pull the ripcord, quit the job. And my boss at the time, the senior partner of the practice, who was a great guy, and he's like, why are you quitting? He's like, you've had great assignments. You've done really interesting stuff. You're working in Monterey, California.
You're a rising star. You'll be able to take over this this vertical and then be a partner, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. Like you could kind of, yeah, like it's looking good, and it was actually a little bit of a speech I had when I was leaving the Navy, although that was more nuanced about like there's a career path, but I was like, but you got to ask yourself, like, at the end of this, is it what you want, and is like being a partner at a consulting firm what you want? And like, and I think, by the way, it's an awesome career for certain folks. I probably like that career more now than I did then. um, but I was like, it's not, I don't think it's ultimately what I want, And so again, if you take the long view of your life, you look at it and you say, it's either a very risky decision to quit a job, because you look at the next 6 months and you're like, there's nothing good about the next 6 months that says quitting now makes sense. If you take a 40-year look at your life, then you feel urgency to get started towards the thing that is like your ultimate investment.
Let's say you're 8 to 10 years in and you're
Mm-hmm.
about to get out in 3 months. And what are some questions that they can ask themselves to start to piece together that puzzle about the long view?
Well, so I think you got to try some things before part of how you get to the answer is by knowing what it's not. So I think I needed to work in management consulting and to find out, like, I don't think this is it. Now, I like being a consultant and I work in professional services and I started my own management consulting business. So it wasn't about like the domain I don't like. It was more about, I want the freedom to sort of work in more specific ways towards my interests. And I think that I can actually make a bigger contribution to clients if I'm not tethered to a larger organization. And so, but some of that you learn. The advice I would give is, number one is like, make sure your personal finances are in order, right? So for me, like, my finances were very simple. But I was like, I can quit and I can do this for 9 months. And like, by the way, I'm going to rent a bedroom from a buddy of mine that costs, $500 a month. And I'll eat ramen noodles. Like, I don't care, And so, which when you're 29 or 28, I guess I was 27 or 28, that can feel like a lot, if it matters to you to have a cool car, then like that's a choice, So you got to be willing to be like, I'm willing to like live simple, live scrappy, because the freedom it affords me is more important than like whatever material wealth I think I've got now or I need now, or whatever. And again,
There are a
material
couple
wealth
of interesting points here. One is the process you went through of thinking through the worst case scenario of, I'll live with friends, I'll eat ramen noodles. 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, guess what? I could live to fight another day, is one thing. But I think the other really critical thing that I'm taking away from this is the importance of white space. And especially if, when people might have 1 or 2 kids, there is no white space.
Right.
And then we don't appreciate the need to have that white space.
Yeah.
It sounded like you did not have that white space to think creatively, to think really about what you wanted to do, because things were going 1,000 miles an hour when you're consulting.
Correct. And it's not just white space. It's white space to think, but it's also white space to experiment. And because what happened, after I left Booz Allen and came back to Chicago, I sort of launched 3 projects at once to sort of see, like, you're just in a state of discovery, right? And part of how you discover is like, you start podcasts, you go talk to like prospective clients about like what their needs are. You figure out if you can, like, you get involved in a lot of things. Like you get your ear to the ground and you join a bunch of initiatives and start adding value where you can. You start to learn, and this has to, in my view, be discovered. It's not intellectual exercise solely. It's you find out, you discover. It's a process of discovery where I'm needed, and where I can add value and where the opportunities are. And so, and that's what I did. I spent about 2 years experimenting, like launched a couple businesses, sort of things that worked, things that didn't, something like one thing that worked real well, something that didn't work, but that's the process of discovery. And I needed that. Maybe there's a better way, more sophisticated way to do it, but I needed that sort of mechanism I needed a space, right, to think, but also to experiment. And I just think that distinction is important, because I think sometimes people think it's about quitting and taking the leap. I think it's much more about, make sure you've got financial continuity, and then build into your life the opportunity to discover through controlled experiments what the opportunities on the other side could look like, And so I think if you're working as a government contractor and you're like, I don't love this. Like, what do you think you do love? And go fill up nights and weekends learning about that, right? And so time is the variable. Like, and I'll acknowledge if you have like kids and stuff happening, like this may not be the season of your life to do that, because you do need some white space, and it's hard to find.
When you talk about finances and making sure things are set, what does that mean? So a lot of people who, let's say they're getting out or they're just out and they've always wanted to start a business and they have one kid or they're expecting their first kid. And like, okay, personal finances, like I have to save everything. So how much do I need to have in the bank before I even start a business or take that risk? Or how do I think through risk before I can actually take the plunge?
Yeah. You know, well, if you're married, it's a collaborative conversation. It's a set of choices. You know, I think it's getting really grounded in the money that we're spending and why we're spending it and where we're spending it. You know, so that's one. And I think if you should feel like you've got 6 to 12 months of runway before you turn off financial income. I think the bigger task, and even when I've been full-time employed, I've always thought of like alternative ways to go and cultivate opportunities on the side. Like even when I was working at McMaster Car Supply Company, like every lunch for an hour, I would go and like to a coffee shop and like work on like business plans. Like I was just hyper conscious of like whatever nooks and crannies in my day I had, that would be consumed with me thinking about and strategizing for what's next. So, you know, get grounded in how do you spend every minute or every day. If you're married, have a conversation with your spouse about how to reclaim some of that. How do we better do this? Get grounded in your math. Like, how much money do I have? You know, can I, like, if I quit today, what's the worst case? Absolutely understand the worst case scenario, but understand some alternative scenarios as well. I think we tend to think about the worst case and the best case. And it's almost always a case in between, you know, that you start something and it's not exactly the win that you thought it was going to be, but it's also not the abject failure that you thought it could be as well. So the truth is almost always something in between those two things. And I think you got to learn some of that. You know, you can't script some of this. It's got to be discovered. And it took me a couple of years of discovery to figure out what the contribution was I could make at that point. But it's, you know, and then I figured it out. But that's an iterative process. And the more you do that, the easier it gets to do that again and again and again. And so I think it's acknowledging, and this is where your ego takes a hit. It's acknowledging like, I'm going to be a season of my life where I don't have the answers, but I'm out in the world discovering what it could look like. And I think we think, particularly in the military, like you got to pre-package the whole solution and like, I'm going to announce it and then it's going to go according to plan. Right? It's like, I'm doing this. And then like, we've already set what success looks like. And that could be a trap, you know. The more provocative thing is to say like, I'm committed to understanding this one problem. And I don't know what the solution is yet, but I'm really curious about it. And I'm going to go spend energy on it.
Oh, I love that, just because so many people have kind of a false expectation of what life after the military might look like, or life in any transition. And it's almost like an acceptance and almost like a radical acceptance that it's going to be broken a lot of that way. But that experimentation, to your point, that discovery is critical to getting to where you want to do and forming that long view.
Yeah. And I think it's the discovery piece is, there's a misconception that entrepreneurs are like, have like a high tolerance for risk. I think we've framed the conversation in entirely the wrong terms. It's not about risk. It's good entrepreneurs strategically de-risk the process of starting a business. Bill Gates had a job while he was building Microsoft, you know, and it was only until like Microsoft had like sufficient maturity that they like quit and did the thing full time, right? And a lot of successful entrepreneurs cultivate and start the thing as a side hustle, right? It's not the folklore of like we mortgaged the house and like we're down to our last dollar and then it worked. I mean, sometimes like I hear those stories as well, but it's folly to think that that's like the instruction manual on how to do this. Like the better, more strategic path, and frankly, and there's research on this, the better path, the smarter path, the more successful path is entrepreneurs de-risk the process so they can go out, run the experiments. They have financial security either because they're still working or because their spouse is working and they're being supported, or because they're getting like BAH, or they're, whatever the case. But it creates a runway for them. And it's not just a runway for their own lives, it's actually turns out to be a runway for the business. So there's less pressure on the business as a result of this runway. There's less pressure on themselves personally, and there's more time to discover like product market fit, if you want to think of it like that. Like, you as the entrepreneur are the product. You need time in the marketplace to determine like where's the fit. And so that there's a process to this. And I have a book coming out in the fall that sort of articulates the process as I see it around how to do this strategically in a way that doesn't create personal risk for yourself. And I think the last thing I'd say, Jordan, is this process of like opening up, creating white space. It's something that I think I do in every chapter of my life where I'm trying to figure out what's next. And like I just stepped down as CEO of Bunker Labs. I'm still with the organization. I have the title of founder, but there's Blake Hogan is now the CEO. And so I'm sort of clearing the decks a little bit to sort of zoom out, step back and say, okay, given the environment we're in, what do I do as a human to make my highest and best contribution, and what's going on here, but you got to zoom out to sort of do that. So, again, so I think it's something that it's not just like you do it the first time you start a business and then you're done. It's like, it's an iterative process. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of thinking and observing that is cultivated over time.
So let's go over to the Bunker Lab story. You started in 2014. What's the story about getting it off the ground and how it has evolved since 2014?
Yeah, it's evolved a lot. So we started in 2014, and there, I have the title of founder, but nothing is done in isolation. There's always partners along the way, and I have a long list of folks who have always done the heavy lift along with me to sort of build the organization to what it is today. But
actually, before we jump too far, can you say what Bunker Labs is?
Yeah,
I think I breezed through that. Sorry.
Get that. Yeah. So Bunker Labs is a organization, nonprofit that helps military veterans and military spouses, and more broadly, sort of the military connected communities start businesses. And so we have 4 programs that we run. We have an online program called Launch Live Online. We have monthly networking events, which we've sort of suspended for now in person, but we're doing them virtually, called Bunker Brews. We have a partnership with WeWork in, I think, 24 cities called the Veterans and Residents Program, where we incubate across those 24 cities, 10 veteran-owned companies for 6 months at a time, veteran or military spouse-owned companies. It's like an incubation. And then we run a program called CEO Circle, which is like a mastermind group. So we run these 4 programs across 31 chapters today across the United States. So it's a national organization. We have about 28 employees total. We have about 200 volunteers, city leaders that actually sort of are ambassadors and run the chapters locally. And then we're supporting about 2,000 entrepreneurs a year through that kind of program portfolio. So it's pretty awesome. And awesome in the sense that like I feel humbled to sort of hopefully be a catalyst to create a platform for entrepreneurs to kind of connect. Because my whole theory is you got some super talented military veterans who want to start businesses, and if we can just get them talking to each other, the wisdom and learned and lived experiences within the community, the question is just how do you help the community kind of gather to sort of be a catalyst for itself, right? So it's less about Bunker Labs is teaching you everything. It's more about Bunker Labs is a network for you to kind of access the world of entrepreneurship support that you need in terms of mentors and experts and programs. And so we take that leverage and we go and negotiate to get access for the veteran community to things like WeWork, to things like, low interest loans, to things like, venture capitals, meeting venture capitalists and the investor community.
So the fundamental thing is to be the community for veteran-owned or military spouses, to be that community, to be that hub for businesses, and to be that connection point.
Exactly, because the theory is, as we see it, there's a lot of support for entrepreneurs that's out there, right? There's Y Combinator, there's Techstars, there's the SBA, there's educational programs, there's a lot of free stuff. There's fintech accelerators, there's food tech accelerators. So there's a lot that's already out there. What we want to be is sort of the front door for the military connected community that really doesn't know. I mean, their mental model of entrepreneurship might just be like, I saw Shark Tank and I thought that was cool. What we want to do is bring them in to the community kind of help them with those early day conversations about like, how do you get started? And then at some point, when they're at a point of maturity, get them networked into like the right next resource, right? So it's like your whole journey as an entrepreneur should not just be Bunker Labs. It should at some point involve your local chamber of commerce, maybe an accelerator, maybe an SBA program, things that are specific to your industry, your niche, the needs that you have. But we do want to be, we don't want to leave all this value of being a part of the military community on the table. And so I sometimes say, I think the military connected community is one of the most powerful networks in the world. The American military community is one of the most powerful networks in the world, but we are one of the least organized. We don't have an alumni association, right? So as simple, and that's like elite meet, right? It's as simple as that is, we don't have a mechanism to convene. And so that's the role that the Chamber of Commerce plays. That's the role that I think Bunker Labs can play to make sure that we've got through lines for business owners that are veterans or military connected that want to sort of tie in and exercise some of that social goodwill that they have back to the military community. So that's the thesis. And then we run a bunch of programs as well.
What do you think are some of the key reasons why you've been successful in building this nationwide network and have had the impact that you have?
Well, I appreciate the question, the compliment. I think number one is like people always tell clean stories about how good it is. I think the reality is always like it's harder and it's messier than you see. So we have challenges like every organization. Like it's hard, especially now. You're dealing with funders and it's challenging, right? It's challenging to run an organization. But to the extent that we have been successful, it's a few things. I'd say it's three things. Number one is its values. It's having cultural values that you live by, hire by, fire by. And we are like dogged about that. And I think most good organizations, like really good organizations, have like very specifically articulated values. And it is the currency by which they hire people, promote people, and exit people, including volunteers, including board members, including sponsors, including customers, right? So the values are, to me, impenetrable. We have 6 of them. I won't go through what they are, but having an articulated value system, it lets people know who you are. And we want people that act like this, believe this, role model this. We want sponsors that believe this, act like this. Our sponsors want organizations that, like sort of, they're looking for that alignment as well. And it really is about the values more than it is about the programs. So the values is number one. And I articulated them early, we've refined them, but if you don't have this stuff written down, if it isn't lived, then it's not material. It's not just like, oh yeah, like we did that 18 months ago, like it's in the break room somewhere. Like that's not what I'm talking about. So the first value of why we've been successful is we're very focused internally on living our values. Like if you do something that is mean, like you don't stay. If you do something that's unethical, like you don't stay. And then those are obvious. It's like, well, yeah, sure, we want nice people and we want ethical people. But a lot of organizations, it's like, if they talk a lot about performance, but they don't talk a lot about behavior, then like, yeah, you can be mean if you get bottom line results. So values are nuanced and they matter. For us, one of our values is about being customer focused, but we say we wouldn't do anything for the community that we wouldn't be excited to do ourselves. And so everything that we do as an organization, we try to sort of make it relevant for you. Like our newsletters are not about Bunker Labs, they're about you, they're about entrepreneurs, they're about people starting businesses, it's stories about them. So it's very externally focused, and that's very intentional. Some websites, you go to their website and it's like, and this is a little counterintuitive, but it's like, it's all about them. I'm not on your bank's website because I want to learn about your bank. I'm on your bank's website because I want to learn about my finances, and I think a lot of companies get that wrong. A lot of nonprofits get that wrong. So we really lead with stuff about you, and we get critique because like you can't find my bio on our website. You may not be able to find other things because it's like, our view is some of it's there if you poke, but it's not the headline. It's really about like, what do you need right now? It's like you go to, so that's a big thing for us. And then the third thing I think is just discipline, operating discipline. Operating discipline is saying no to a lot of things that are inbound. You have to be really laser focused. And I think I think there's mixed messaging on this for entrepreneurs, because on the one hand, it's like be open to opportunity. I have seen more companies die by, death by networking, because they're just like coffee after coffee after coffee, networking after networking after networking. And there's a place for that, to network and to discover and have coffee and connect and talk. But I will tell you that if the balance of your day isn't focused on execution towards the thing that you need to get done, you can waste a lot of time, you can waste a lot of money. And that's hard to do when you're a nonprofit, because everyone wants to sort of like network. And so you got to find a way to sort of carve out, have that, but stay focused on your mission. And I think I see too many entrepreneurs without a clear thesis about what it is they're trying to do. They're not focused. It's like, to me, it's like you're either kind of playing offense against your own agenda, or you're playing defense against someone else's, right? So you got to find the balance of like, but if it's something that we should have pursued, then why didn't we decide that we wanted to pursue it before it just landed on your lap, And so there's a lot of stuff, particularly when you're growing an organization, as we have, 6 years, there's a lot that comes at you by way, it's like, it's an opportunity. But if you stop and react, what you end up with is like a really cobbled together strategy, like a hodgepodge of things that may not be bad. But again, it's not about, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? It's like, it could be a great technology platform, but it's the wrong time and it's not part of our strategy right now. So you've really got to have like a mental model for like, of discipline for like, here's what we're doing now. It's like being on a diet. It's like, is keto a good diet? Sure, it's a good diet. Can carb loading be a good diet? It can be a great diet. But it's all about like, it's about the consistency of the diet. It's because if you do one diet this week and a different diet next week, like none of it works. And so it's about picking a strategy and sticking to it. And then really knowing that all the stuff that comes at you, whether it's in or out of scope, against the strategy that you have articulated. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs think it's about being like widely open to all ideas. And I think you got to have a calibration of like, this is actually where I'm trying to go. And I know why. And I know what kinds of conversations are within scope and without, like, beyond scope for that mission.
It's interesting. And there's that, some of the best ideas come from thinking tangentially, but not letting that tangential thinking get you away from the critical few things that you need to do in a given day or week. And an example of that would be, a lot of the videos that we are producing, sometimes like when I look at videos on different social media platforms, because the viewers are different, like I get so many creative ideas on how to incorporate that into my market within private equity investment banking and doing media for them. So, but I have to keep things fresh. But in a given day, you can't watch 10 hours of YouTube videos. Otherwise, it just gets away from you.
No, and this is like, I think really this is the tension in entrepreneurship. And I call it like controlled curiosity. It's like, I'm going to strategically step beyond the boundaries of this thing and go have a walkabout. And because I need the situational awareness. But I'm mindful of like how much time is spent doing that versus a set of tasks that I've determined like are critical for me moving forward. And it, you can call it like KPIs. I mean, you can call it, there's a lot of ways to put sort of discipline around this, and having, I think, a good operating system as an entrepreneur is critical. Like, I think, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but like knowing like what is a good week for me this week going to look like? What is a good day for me? What is a good year for me? Just like that simple kind of frame, and then keeping yourself honest, because busy is a horrible metric of evaluation for how's it going. And like the first answer is like to sort of answer it in the context of how busy they are. And that's the wrong answer. If you're doing nothing, that probably means something's not working. But a good answer is like, I'm on plan. I'm on plan for what I have determined I need to do.
Before we kind of transition over to entrepreneurship in our current context, what are some, in looking back at the past 6 years of growing Bunker Labs, what have you discovered about yourself as kind of your key strengths and your biggest weaknesses that you needed to complement with team and with advisors?
Oh, it's a great question. And I think this soul searching is critical. We talk about entrepreneurship and careers more generally, and we envision it as like an upward kind of up and to the right model. We sort of definitionally sort of envision it as like climbing mountains towards peaks, like progress is like sort of more and more success, and it's up and to the right. That's the wrong way to think about it, in my view. I think a better metaphor is sort of like lily pads. Like there's a pond full of lily pads, and the question is like, which one do you belong on? And all of them are great, but we're all here to play a specific role. And the question is, like, the CEO's job isn't better or more important. It pays more usually, but it's not better or more important than the person who works in HR or the person that works in facilities. But the skill set required and applied is just specific to that. And so I think for me, my self-discovery is sort of like, I'm good on a growth trajectory as a visionary with a small team. When it's like enterprise level, I think I'm not, like, that's not really where I thrive. I think if it's like scrappy early startup, I'm not a sufficient generalist to sort of like do all the jobs. I mean, I got Bunker there, but I do like to start things, but I like to do it with a small team.
But yeah. On the part about strengths and weaknesses, so you're saying that you really like to be impactful and up and to the right, but in a smaller context.
I think it's more about the organizational stage that something is at, right? So I think it's fun to, when something gets to an enterprise level, which I would say loosely Bunker Labs is sort of at, it's just a different skill set. It's a different skill set. It's a different sort of appetite required. It's also about how long you as a founder want to sort of, you think that you are the right person for a given role. And so, for me, it's not about building sort of like a legacy. It's not about building something that you can sort of like sit on top of and like rest. Like that's not the point. It's about taking ideas that you think are interesting, putting them together in a way that sort of the market also finds interesting, and then seeing them sort of grow and scale. That is the satisfaction for me. And doing that in a context where there's like impact involved. Like, so I don't, everything that I will do, I think needs to sort of touch, human lives, is, hopefully being impactful for them. And so I think it's just about that. It's about knowing like, this is what I'm built to do in the world, and not having judgment around that. And I think good businesses with good strategy know what they are, and they also know what they are not. So they're quick to say, like I had a foundation reach out to me yesterday, and they're like, we're interested in funding veterans organizations that are doing this kind of work. It's tempting, especially when you're a startup, to be like, I'll do that because there's funding, or like that could be a customer. But maturity is saying, hey, I totally know what you're trying to do. You should go talk to this person. It's not us. You should go give the business to this person or this organization, because they're right for that. I think that's maturity of an organization, which, by the way, it earns you a lot of confidence, because then people say, wow, this organization, they're not just going to sell you something. They know what it is that they do. They're very clear about that. But if we decide that we wanted to do that, we should call them first, because they're very defined. Same thing for us as entrepreneurs and as people. It's like, it's knowing, and there's a little bit of confidence that has to come with this, where you can say, this is what I'm really built to do. And so if you need things that look like this, call me, because I can do it. And by the way, if you have things that don't look like that, like, I'm not the person to do that. But that involves saying no to opportunities, including when things are successful or going well. And so, I don't know. There's no answers with this other than, I think it's something that you explore within yourself, and you sort of learn. And I think it's an iterative journey, at least it has been for me.
So with where we're at in this current context, with the economy, with the health crisis, what is your message to the entrepreneurs out there, and whether or not, just things that they should be thinking about on whether or not they should start a business, or if they're in the middle of a storm, how to persevere through that?
Yeah. Well, it's tough. I think the military community's got some unique training as it relates to this. So, to me, it's like, put yourself in a mental model of like, we're doing battle, and, like deployment in the Persian Gulf was painful. It's not fun, but you find dark humor in some of the ridiculousness of it all. And so I think you've got to try to draw on some of that levity of just the fact that we're in this together. Take the long view. Like, we're going to get through this. Like, we had the roaring 20s. Like, it's going to be a hard time. It is a hard time. It's a weird time. It's a unique time. But if you take sort of the long view, it's also the time that you're going to look back on and be like, dude, remember when we sheltered in place for like a year. Like I didn't leave my apartment, and like my neck hurt because I was like at Zoom all day. So I think take the long view, recognize that we're in this, put people around you, not necessarily physically, but virtually and definitely emotionally, who can kind of ride this with you. Get simple in terms of what your material needs are. Realize you can do more with less. I think that's a wake-up call for most Americans. I think the military community is probably already wired to that thinking. And then at some point, know this: we're in a period of massive disruption. Higher education, hospitality, travel, leisure, retail. I mean, massive disruption. I think bad business models are being decelerated into obsolescence. Good business models will be accelerated into their sort of leadership stature. And I think that amidst this disruption, you're going to have opportunities. And so I think the smart entrepreneur in this moment is sort of like hunker down, doing the things you got to do personally, sort of ride the storm, take care of your mental and your physical health, take care of those around you, and then be thinking and speculating about what's next, because there will be a boom economy that comes out of this. And if work from home is the new normal, then there's going to be a relocalization of economies. There's going to be, a whole set of things that are possible. How we think about higher ed, how we think about healthcare, and opportunities will sort of be there, and it's entrepreneurs that will sort of grasp those opportunities. And so I just think take a long view and believe that like the fundamentals are going to be the fundamentals. Like if you are close to your customers and can serve them in ways that feels, competent and coherent, then like you're going to be successful. Q baby. I got mine too. That's all right.
I just got the hand up, which happens to coincide with the ending of this because you have a call to go to. And I really appreciate your time with this.
Thanks, Jordan. It's always good to be with you, and thanks for what you're doing.
Awesome.
Tell these stories.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. Thank
Bye.
you.